According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of diversity is the condition of having or being composed of different elements, a variety. What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Fervent 4. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I have my co-host, Tim Ryan, lead man at startwheel.org. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent 4 is a weekly show each and every Thursday at 11 a.m. dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business no matter the climate. Hot, cold, windy, snowy, it doesn't matter. Inclusion is defined as the act or practice of including and accommodating people who have historically been excluded as because of their race, gender, sexuality, or ability. Ronnie Parker is helping drive the force behind diversity and inclusion in the 757. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ronnie and Tim. Well, I don't have to welcome Tim. He's always here, but let's clap it up. How's it going, guys?
How are you, man?
Hello. Still good morning. So good morning, gentlemen. I hope you both are doing well.
You know, this is something that people think is the most ridiculous thing, and I didn't think I was going to say this, but so like if I'm like walking my dog or I'm running or riding my bike in my neighborhood and there's people walking by, I always say good morning, right? Even if it's like 6 o'clock at night. And they like people look at me like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, well, I mean, I'm hoping that they think, well, do you think he left for his workout at like 11 o'clock? He's been working out for 7 hours.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
You always say good morning?
Yeah, well, yeah, because typically I run in the morning. So when you are saying good morning a dozen times, every workout, 7 days a week, I mean, it's just muscle memory at that point.
Yeah.
Well, sticking to your guns, gentlemen, I appreciate that you say good morning. I'll say good morning and look at my time and yell a correction while they're way down the street. So, good afternoon.
I'm just there like, oh, there's that guy. He doesn't know what time it is. There it is. So Ronnie, this is a show that I think is going to be really, I hate the word interesting, but I'm going to say it's interesting. It's something that a lot of people talk about, but don't talk about, shy away. Those were two dictionary definitions of diversity and inclusion. Are they on point? How do you define kind of each of those things? And I think you added equity in there pre-show as well. Maybe just get a glimpse of how you feel about all those three things or what the definition.
I try to keep it simple, you know. We're living in diversity every day. Our food options are diverse. Our clothes are diverse. What our outfit we decide to get on when we get out of the bed, it's diverse. So diverse is almost the easy piece, right? Like you go out of your door and you're in a diverse society. My title, of course, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Hampton Roads Chamber. That equity piece is how we can make sure that everybody gets a same size slice of the pie when we're talking about opportunities, we're talking about funding, we're talking about making sure that you not only can survive, but thrive. So we're talking equity, we're talking about how are we able to make sure people have the same amount and are using their resources to thrive in society. And inclusion is just making sure people always say, well, there's a seat at the table, I've got a seat at the table, but am I included? For me, inclusion is if you call me into your company and you say, hey, Ronnie, I want to start to address inclusion. How can I do so? And I'll say, hey, here's you calling me is step one. Step two, what is your goal and why do you want to address diversity, equity, inclusion? And after that, for loss of better terms, maybe some comical relief, I don't want to speak to your manager. I want to speak to the people that are at the forefront of your organization, that are not in those leadership roles, that are not the decision makers, because they're going to tell me whether your organization is inclusive or not, and they're going to give me some tips on how we can get started in being inclusive.
Do you find that this is different for the employees of the business compared to the actual business owner who's taking, the risk in that, or do you feel like it's really just for the teammates' perspective?
I think it's vastly different. A CEO says, hey, we hire CEOs, they're the decision makers. Their job is to make sure that the company is moving in the right direction, bringing in that revenue and making the organization stand out. What we often tend to forget as CEOs is that we have the marketing team that they do great jobs. That's their job, to market the organization. But our first line champions are right there at our organization. And a lot of those are the frontline workers. So when I go and talk to a CEO and he says, look, this thing's running well, We're a well-oiled machine. Why do I need to change? And I say, great. Now, if you don't mind, let me have a roundtable discussion with some of your frontline employees. And you don't have to be in the room. You can, but I can promise you the conversations deviate when the CEO's in the room versus when the frontline staff are in the room. And they'll say quickly, either this organization is doing great, we love it here, our retention's amazing, we're happy, morale is up, or they'll say, man, this is, it's a paycheck, and I'm here because I'm worried about taking care of my family, but there's some things we can fix. So there's normally vast differences when we look at those two perspectives.
How long have you been in this position, and how long is this? Are you the first person in this position, or how long has the position been in existence within the chamber?
Yeah, no, I am the first at the Hampton Roads Chamber as a diverse equity inclusion officer. Now our CEO, Brian Stevens, has always, since the beginning, I've been in the chamber now nearly 5 years, has said, look, I need you to think, outside in sometimes as well. What are we not doing that we need to do? Look at things from an inclusive perspective. So I've been doing this since I've been at the chamber. The difference here is, and I think the difference that I think the nation saw was the impact that the public treatment of George Floyd was for the nation. At that time, which was great, by the way, which many organizations looked to make some action or some changes. The difference is that we all of a sudden see these influx of DEI officers. Everybody saying, hey, how can we make a difference? How can we take this change? So it's great that we were starting to see these things, because I just actually added this on to my title. I have multiple hats, but it was just early, I believe January or February of this year. They said, hey, we want you to up this some more now. We need to be more visible, and we need to show that we've not just been doing this year. We've been doing it for a long time coming. And I think it's a good opportunity for the chamber to be at the forefront of these changes and help our region progress and move forward.
So with that, you've been in the position, you said, for 5 years.
Correct.
How would you chart the progress that has been made in this area? I mean, so has it increased, and then George Floyd happened, then what happened from there, and then how have we then changed since then?
Yeah, if I'm speaking regionally, I think before the show, we actually started a little bit. We were talking about the Kardashev scale, and for, I guess, those that are tuning in, the Kardashev scale kind of rates, where we are as a civilization as far as how we can control the resources of the earth, of our planet. And what I said was, let's go ahead and here now, the Fervent 4, and create the 757 scale and see where we are as far as addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion as a region. And the good thing about the Kardashev scale is that we're not at level 1. I believe there's 4 or 5 levels in the Kardashev scale as far as advanced civilizations. And I would say we've made so much progress as a species, even though we're not even at the first level yet of the progression of the advancement of our society. So in the 757, how are we doing with DE&I, and how have things changed? What have I seen? We've made progress where people are starting to say something might be wrong. We saw an insane change with George Floyd, with people saying, wow, there's things going on here that maybe we need to open our eyes up a little bit more about. And we see that with the hiring of these people, and we're asking them to take these things on and help make a difference. But right now, I would say, if I'm creating the 757 scale, we're not at level 1. We haven't accepted as a region, as a Commonwealth of Virginia, that as a whole, we know there need to be changes in our society, and we want to address them. So some people are, some people aren't, but right now we're not there yet.
In the local business community, a lot of people have said non-race related things to this comment, is that this area will change when those older people die. Basically, they pass and they go away. That's when things will change. And that was from just a business community standpoint. Is that in an overall thing from a locality standpoint? This is a very ridiculous statement that I'm about to make, I think. But is it the same kind of thing where you just need that group of people to go away so that this new way where we've grown up and been a little bit differently, I don't know how to articulate it in a nice PC way, which I've never been known to be PC, but I feel like that's kind of where it is. It's like that
the natural evolution needs to take place.
Right. Yeah. So that group that was historically stereotypically and generalizing, maybe more on the end that we're trying to remove. Once they get out, does that help us get through this, or is it something completely different, do you think?
From the people I've worked with, surprisingly, that would seem to be what needs to happen. But I will tell you, the loss of better terms, the older generation have become, a lot more accepting, and they are. So I will tell you right now, I don't know how proprietary the information is. So I will say that they are right now the ones that are leading what should be up and coming and something that's going to be presented soon in our region, the standard to say, hey, here's some guidelines to start addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So while the overall mindset is that, hey, these old folks, they don't get it. They don't understand. They're set in their ways. And there are a lot of people like that. But I'll throw one at you guys, and maybe you'll understand. And I know working with Jim Carroll with the SBDC, you'll know COVID forced us to make a difference in how we operate. It forced us to change our normal way of life to survive. And the same thing is happening now, where we have an opportunity to lead that direction, lead that discussion. And as things are changing, because we can talk, CEOs like to talk numbers. They like to see how things are going to progress for their business. We can sit here all day and talk about how many progressive agendas are coming forward for legislation and how things are continually moving in that direction. So it's only a matter of time before we decide to join the discussion and say, hey, let's shape this thing so we have some sort of control over how we operate. Or as far as things are going forward, we're going to be forced into making a difference. And if COVID's told us anything, when we're forced to do things, it's a very uncomfortable environment, as we now see people that want to get back, want to get started, businesses are being hurt. And there's the other side that we understand businesses are being hurt, but they don't want to leave their house or their shelter. So those old guys are ones right now in our region, in the 757, that are leading the charge behind the scenes and saying, let's make a difference. So I wouldn't count them out yet. They're still working really hard to make a change.
I think one thing that's interesting, though, is that for so many years, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, it's time for diversity training. And then let's throw up the PowerPoint slides and we're going to learn how to be more diverse and more inclusive through PowerPoint. And that's crazy to me. Yeah. I mean, I think that what needs to really happen here is the fact that we need to sit down. And just as you said the word several times, we need to communicate. We need to be vulnerable, and we need to just have a discussion, and we need to talk, because I think a lot of people are just really uncomfortable and they don't know how to act or what to say or how to be inclusive or how to be diverse. And it just means you have to be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't know. What's the first step that I need to take in order to do something? What's your take on the PowerPoint versus actually having a discussion method?
You brought up something that's very, very recent conversations I've been in with Stephanie Gorm of the Volunteer Hampton Roads and Mary Kate Andrus as well, YWCA, and Ted Counts, our membership vice president for the chamber. And we talked about that. We said, look, PowerPoint presentations and applications that say, hey, go through this and then get to the end and print your certificate and say, look, I'm diversity trained, throw it in a drawer and be done with it, will absolutely work in a negative direction for you. Because what's going to happen is somebody's going to challenge you and they're going to come in and here's the next level of diversity and inclusion, right? So we'll address the race issues, we'll address the male-female issues in the working environment. But the next level is, where's your organization at on helping the disabled? Where they at? Does your organization have Braille on the wall for people that come in? Does your organization, as we saw through COVID-19, have childcare for families that are struggling to find care for their kids? So sitting there and saying, let's think of a PowerPoint presentation that'll get me through this so I can put a certificate on my wall is the exact wrong way to go. And I applaud Mary Kate Andrus for coming up with these just dinner. And I can't say it's her idea. I don't know exactly where it started, but she's the one that introduced it to me, where we have these roundtable in your face discussions about what inclusion means to people and how we can address them from different levels. So the phase one, I would say for people, is to not depend on those PowerPoints and those applications, but to have those in person or through virtual, like we're doing now, discussions thanks to COVID, to say, hey, how can we begin to make a difference and then hear from people and hear their real emotions about how we can make a difference, as opposed to the applications that, to me, just don't work.
So you mentioned several things there. So not just diversity from a race, et cetera, piece, but then when you get into like having Braille, or having now, let's say, all these mandates from the state from a COVID perspective on things that you need to do in your business. Like, where does a business look at something like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and include from the inclusion standpoint, include that into kind of their budget of stuff? Because I feel like a lot of businesses would agree that they want this stuff to be there, but maybe the business from a budgetary standpoint doesn't allow their business to have the trainings of the world, the PowerPoints of the world, the Braille on the walls of the world. And now, like, we had someone on recently who said, I have so many mandates, I don't know how to pay for any of this stuff. And it's hard enough to get people in. So for a business that agrees or disagrees with having diversity, DEI things in their business, how does a business actually look and pay for those things or include those things so that they don't go under?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Especially in the current COVID-19 pandemic that we're living in now, people just they're losing resources. They don't know where you're going to get this money to pay for these extra things that, that Ronnie from the chamber is telling you to do. And the thing is that you have to be inclusive. The word of the day is inclusive, right? You have to put yourself out there in groups that you would not normally work with. We saw what happened when people were scavenging for toilet paper and stuff. You have to look at supplier diversity. You have to go out and associate people that you don't always associate with. And that's where your organization can thrive. So maybe you can't go out and put this elaborate program together and address all these strategic plans for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what you can do is connect with the organizations in your community. And you can always ask, who's doing it right? And how do I get started? So say you want to address, people being more inclusive in your organization, and you want to hire a person on staff to say, Ronnie, we need the Braille. We need to address issues in our community. How can we start addressing childcare needs of our employees? Well, if you want to do that, there's subject matter experts everywhere. And the only thing we're doing is hurting ourselves by not reaching out to someone that we don't know. When people were hurting for toilet paper and supplies, they were looking at Amazon and Walmart and it wasn't there. How many of the people in SBDC are just starting their businesses and they're craving to get out there and to be known, that have these supplies, that have these things that, hey, you know what? I'm just starting out. Let me come help your organization out. Let's get my name out there as well. And then let me help you decide to come up and be diverse and inclusive. Let's put a plan together. So you don't always have to go out and have this elaborate plan. What you have to do is want to educate yourself and want to make sure you get those networks, that communication working, because someone out there wants to show you their talent and their skills, and they're willing to come into your organization and do so. You just have to invite them in. We don't just, usually you go to a door and it's locked or it's not open. You got to knock and be invited in. You don't just walk in. So it's on those organizations to reach out and learn something new by connecting with people. And I guarantee there's help there.
Well, and the thing about it is, and as me as an entrepreneur, one that works with entrepreneurs, I mean, I'm a very optimistic person. I try to be as positive as I possibly can be. But I'm going to jump on one of the things that bothers me, soapbox for a second. And the thing about it, like in today's society in general, everybody wants to take the easy way. Nobody wants to challenge themselves. Nobody wants to make themselves uncomfortable. They just want life to come easy. And when it comes to a topic like this, before the show, we were talking about the parallelisms between working out and diversity and inclusion. Well, this is one of these parallelisms in the sense of, you know what? When you go and work out, the first time that you run around the block, the next day you're going to be sore because your muscles aren't used to working like that. And you know what? The first time you have this conversation about diversity and inclusion, it's going to hurt. It's going to make you uncomfortable. But the thing about it is, if you want to make a change for yourself, you've got to push through the pain and you've got to endure that. And that's the only way that you're going to make a positive change. So that's my challenge to the people that are listening out there is, seek that uncomfortable zone and embrace it. Strengthen that uncomfortable muscle and learn something new. That's my soapbox, guys. So.
No, I before you say anything, right? It's interesting because like I'm just like writing little notes of like things, and so when I work out, I typically listen to an audiobook, unless I'm trying to go fast. Then I listen to my Taylor Swift mixtape. Hey, there's nothing the matter with listening to a little Tay-Tay while you're trying to run fast. Nothing like 13-minute miles. I'm kidding. So a book that I read recently was called The Notorious RBG about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it's just like mind-boggling to me, like politics aside, Supreme Court aside, just like it's mind-boggling to me that 70 years ago, some of these things that weren't in place. And so you sit there and you see this lady who's really trying to like push some of this stuff, and you're just like, what? Like, how like, why? And so like, it's just, I guess it's the course that we have to go through is this stuff is going to go away. And it's just that it was shocking to me that even though I had learned these things over the years, I forgot about them, I guess. And then this woman really pushed for a lot of stuff from a female perspective, and it's cool to see. And I had signed up for this. Someone I guess loved her so much that they created this race, this virtual 5K for her called like the Notorious RBG Run or something like that. And so like it's just interesting that there are these individuals who really push through and become that that icon for a movement, if you will. And it's powerful. So
no.
Yeah. I think one of the best books that I read in 2020, I'm just get fired up when it comes to this topic, and I have so many things that I want to talk about. But one of the best books that I read in 2020 is Love Leadership. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but that was
who wrote that?
Changing. It was written by John Hope Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
But it was awesome. I mean, it totally opened up my eyes, and it was very profound in the sense of just leading through love versus leading through control.
But don't you think like a lot of the reason is kind of back to the fitness world? So like we love on the show, Ronnie, to talk about the parallels of things other than the thing that you're trying to fix. Yeah. And so fitness is a good one since Tim works out like crazy and I'm trying to follow in his footsteps. But like it comes back to, I'm basically lazy. I don't care about that thing. Right. And so as blatant and as blunt as that is, it seems like a lot of people just don't care about diversity and inclusion. They're lazy about it and just let it continue to go, just like their health and working out and stuff like that. I mean, how many people have been talking about COVID as this disastrous thing and not thinking about, it seems like all the healthy people in the world who work out are being fine, right? You hear all these athletes that get it, yet none of them have real issues whatsoever. Is that because they're healthy people? And so this is actually a problem for people who are unhealthy, and we need to be fixing that. And so it seems like there's a ton of parallels in all of this.
Yeah, you can take let's talk fitness and let's talk parallels with DE&I. Let's you guys are your gym guys. I one time was. You see my kids on the wall behind me. They slow me down a bit. They're 3 now, but you go to the gym every day. That's right. You look at the biceps. You're working the bicep machine, and you're like, man, you know what? I like the results I'm getting from my bicep workouts. I'm going to continue to do my bicep workout, and I'm going to ignore everything else because to me, from my perspective, it's not affecting me. It doesn't affect me. I'm fine. I don't need to do anything else. I like my biceps. They're getting me where I want to be. And then you come to find out, your legs are weaker. You're having to actually walk to the car. If something happens, you can't run anywhere because you're not working your legs out. But to your perception, I didn't need to do that because my biceps are working for me. The same thing happens with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I will always hear from a CEO, look, we're making money. We're doing what we want to do. We've got a great staff. Why do I need to be inclusive? What is the ROI for me to invest in this? And from starters, if you're looking to address diversity, equity, and inclusion, you come to me and say, what's the reason for me to invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion? And then you're starting with your ROI, but you're not making a real difference. So you're thinking about yourself and doesn't help anybody else. But what you don't realize is by not working out your legs, by not working out your arms, by not working out your core, it's a full, well-oiled machine. So if you're working out so well and then boom, COVID-19 hits, and all of a sudden you don't know how to operate any way differently because you've always thought the way that you think, your organization's having trouble. And we're seeing that with a lot of organizations that have operated the same way and have not been inclusive. But you can get those people on staff, those people that say, hey, well, this organization is doing this, or how about we address this culture? What's this culture looking at? There's a guy that works for Google. I can't think of his name, but he has this really cool calendar. And every day of the year, there's something different for a different culture that they accept or they do. So when you go to your organization and look, we have our mission, vision, and our values, right? But we've got these employees that are quiet and they say, hey, this is great. We think this is awesome. We're going to celebrate this holiday. But what about the employee that has a holiday of his or her own that's in your organization and they know it comes and they ask for that day off? And you're like, well, why do you need that off? That's not nothing that we usually celebrate in our organization. But there goes your morale. There goes your champion for your organization, the person that's going out every day saying this organization is great. So there's these little small things that we don't think about that we need to work out in our own organization to have that inclusive voice or that culture change where culture is constantly changing. It's a constant, never-ending improvement. How can we do this? We're doing this great. Now, how can we do it better? And that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Great. You've got women and men on your board. Are they involved in leadership positions? Great. You've got people that are, you've hired some veterans. Great. We've got the Hampton Roads area, the 757, and we've got the one of the largest military populations. How many veterans, mental health, PTSD facilities do you see in our area? How inclusive are we to that community that we really thrive off of? So we can always do better. If you're at an organization that says, hey, I got it, I'm in the gym, I'm buff, I don't need to do anything, I'm there, I'm where I want to be, and that's your end goal, you're doing it wrong.
Well, are you doing the full body workout? Are you doing the single move? I think that's the moral of that. What's interesting is, so about 10 years ago, I was doing a ton of events, and I'm going to assume I was using a Google Calendar or an Apple Calendar, and they weren't showing a ton of holidays at that point. And so I had booked an event that was on a Jewish holiday. And as a non-Jewish guy, I didn't know to think about something like that. And so this guy emailed me and he was like, hey, like this is a Jewish holiday. I'm sure a ton of your potential attendees aren't going to come because it's a Jewish holiday. And I was like, oh, wow. And so after that, I can't remember if I rescheduled, canceled, what I did with that specific event. But after that, I looked at a calendar of those things to make sure, hey, like, are you booking this on a day when it's not the, quote unquote, normal holidays, but it's still a normal holiday if you get what I mean. And so it's little things like that if you really want to include someone, as little and as stupid as it is to include that, stupid easy to include something like that. Like, how hard is it to just look at that calendar and say, oh, don't do it on this day, right? There's nothing difficult about that. You just got to include it. And so I think it's important from a leadership perspective, from an organization or an organizer perspective, to just, cross the T, dot the I, look at the little thing and say, is this a date that's going to affect a lot of people? And are you willing to change that for it? And so I think you have to live and you learn from that.
That's it. And that goes to a point that Tim was talking about earlier. And I think you both mentioned it. How can we start to address some of these things when we know businesses are suffering from COVID-19? And a lot of the times, because we look to our C-suite individuals in our organizations, we don't realize we've got people that have those answers that are at the front line of our organization, but we don't turn to them for answers. Save yourself some money and bring those staff into these leadership discussions so that they'll say, hey, excuse me, boss, I know we're getting ready to have this event on this day, but Hanukkah starts here, right? So we should probably not do that. It doesn't take you to go out and spend thousands of dollars or hire somebody to tell you not to have an event on that day. So there's ways that you can do it without spending a bunch of money.
Tim had shared with me this article recently that Elon Musk had talked about MBAs compared to people. Basically, to me, it's like the person in the boardroom versus the person that's actually in the ground level doing it. Tim, can you, because I feel like it's the exact same thing he's saying.
Yeah, I was just, he was at a conference recently talking about the fact that it's of his opinion that there's too many MBAs out that are leading businesses right now, that there needs to be more people that are focused on the product and the sales that are out there on the floor and continuing to push the business forward versus creating PowerPoint slides and attending meetings.
Yeah, that's where you get your information from. I think I'm not up to date now, but I know maybe a year or two ago, the highest YouTube channel was a young kid playing with toys. And parents and kids were tuning in. They loved this kid playing with toys. And the thing is that he wasn't the CEO that created the toy, but what he is he's the person that's engaged with it every day. He understands the toy. He understands what to do with it. He understands how it works, and he's excited about that toy. There are people in your organization that are the front line, people that are always talking to customers, that know what the customer needs, that hear the customer complaints, that never make it to the CEO half the time. But when we go to address what we need to do to help bring in more customers, to bring in more revenue, we get around the table with C-suite people and discuss it. And so oftentimes they're not in the same seats as the people that are at the front of the table. So some of the greatest ideas are left in your organization, and you don't know it because we're not inclusive, even in our own organizations.
A lot of people might say that 2020 was the year of protest, the year of marches. It sounds like the things that we're talking about here on the show, a protest and a march, while nice on the surface, aren't actually moving the needle the way that things actually have to get moved. Is there something to counter a march or a protest to actually start fixing things stronger? Or do you think that marches and protests are a great thing for these to push DE&I?
Look, marches and protests get attention. That's what they're meant to do, right? They're meant to bring light to an issue at hand. They definitely work. They've been going on for years and years now, and they get people's attention. What happens is, and what makes a lot of people that don't agree with a lot of those marches and protests is that they think that's all that's happening. And oftentimes, sadly, sometimes that is all that happens. People say, hey, we're going to meet here. We're going to march. We're going to protest those injustices that we see. And then we go home and we talk on our phone about how great the march was. But, I would encourage people to, have your marches, have the protest, and then let's get a group of people together. Let's have those roundtable discussions. Let's invite people that might not agree with our marches or might not agree with our protests. And let's say, what was your take? What did you get from that? How did that make you feel? Because I think we mentioned it earlier. Communication is the key, right? We have to talk. That's why we don't know what we don't know. And we have to make sure that people want to be heard. Whether you're right or you're wrong, people want to be heard. So when I have these conversations with people, I always start with, hey, we're going to have a diversity, equity, and inclusive conversation. What do you see, or how do you perceive things that you see on TV right now? How do you perceive things what happen with the National Football League? How do you perceive these protests that sometimes are blocking your car when you're not able to go where you want to go? People open up because they want to get their voices heard. And they're a lot more likely to talk to you once you listen to them. And sometimes we don't want that to happen. We want to get it's an instant reaction. As soon as we hear something we don't agree with, we got to, excuse me, no, but you're wrong. And nothing gets done that way. So I encourage people to have the protest, have the marches, bring light to the situation, and then go into those meetings with people, invite people into your conversation and say, look, this is what you saw we stand for. How does it make you feel? How do you feel about these things? And how can we come together and communicate? Because there's a big difference between acceptance and agreement, right? You don't have to agree on everything, but you have to accept that somebody feels different. Because what happens is, what I tell people, there's a thing here I got to use that says it's a loss in translation. So if I'm looking at something that I don't agree with, and I say they're not for me, I don't get it, I don't agree with it. But what I don't see, the people that are marching and protesting, for them, it's a cry for help. Help, we're hurting, we need help. But I'm not communicating them. So when it goes across the line and it gets translated, it's a war cry to us. Hey, they're against us. I don't know what they're talking about, but I don't like it. And it's a failure on communication piece for people to talk and say, hey, how can we come together and address this issue? And it happens all the time, and we see it now nationally.
What this being such a transient area and so military heavy, how does our area rank compared to other metropolitan areas across the U.S. in terms of diversity, equality, and inclusion?
Yeah, no, we are the first state, first Commonwealth to appoint Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Janice Underwood, in the governor's cabinet level. So we have said, hey, we're going to recognize this in the governor's cabinet. We're going to understand that there's an issue here in the Commonwealth, and we have a person that will address it. So I would encourage you, a small plug, to check out the One Virginia plan from Dr. Underwood that says, hey, Virginia, no matter what organization you're in, here's how you can address diversity, equity, and inclusion. So compared to other, states, I think we're above par, or below par if you're talking golf terms, but we're doing better than others because we did say, hey, there's an issue here. We need to find a way to address it. And I compliment our governor for saying, hey, let's do this. I want to make a difference, and let's start by doing that. So as far as getting the wheels turning, we're not quite there yet. There are other states that are saying, hey, okay, well, they're a bit more progressive than we are. So it depends on where your politics lies sometimes. But there's legislation that we can work on as a region that says, hey, we want to push these initiatives forward. But the conversations are happening. We do have a set of guidelines from our governor's cabinet that we can start to address as the Commonwealth of Virginia. So as far as I've seen, looking at other states, we are leading in several categories.
Because of this thing, the cell phone, we all have access to video. We all have access to recorded video, stream live video, because of so many different platforms. And it shows us something that I think historically we never really saw, or if we saw, it was from a bird's eye view, or a view that we didn't necessarily, we couldn't really get behind. Is video making things better? Part one. And then part two, how do you get the full context of a story with video in some of the scenarios that I think that have unfolded in the last 18, 24 months or so?
I would say part one is video making things better. Not necessarily. We still have the same issues. Videos are not that new. We had video with Rodney King, and we still have the same issues here today. So is video making things better? No. Are video tapes exposing things? Absolutely. So now it's not just a he said, she said. We see it, but the issue, I guess, is how we perceive things. So our brains are very, have different layers to them. They're very complicated. Not many of us understand them. But what our brains do is it compartmentalizes things to make it easier for us. Hey, that thing's bad. Hey, that's hot. Don't touch it. When we see something on videotape that to someone is gruesome, it shouldn't happen. What can we do to fix it? Because of circumstances that people go through, their brain compartmentalizes it, and they say, hey, well, this group of people or these persons should have listened. They should have obeyed the rules. They shouldn't have been doing this, and they wouldn't be in that circumstance. So video helps because it exposes things to light. It allows us to have that conversation piece. It opens up the door for that communication that we've been talking about so much lately. But it also affords us the opportunity to say, hey, we see it. Now let's get together and discuss what we can do about it. Whether you agree or disagree, there's an opportunity here for us to now say, hey, let's look at how we can address this issue. Because what we want to do is we want to have our brains make it easier for us. We want to decompartmentalize some of that information, because sometimes as the easy button is good to push and it gets us through things, it doesn't address the situation. So that DEI training we were talking about, where let's put it on PowerPoint, let's get everybody there, let's get to the end and get to that certificate, is not the way to go. I will tell you that a lot of people right now are looking for a book that says the guidelines and steps to being a diverse and inclusive person. And they want to go to the front page, they want to get to the end page, they want it to say goal, and they want to go forward and have all the information they need to be diverse and inclusive.
And that book is written by Ronnie Parker.
It would fail miserably. I'd hate to do that to anyone. It's a continuous process, right? You read one book. We're talking about the books we're reading. I was just reading A People's History of the United States by, I think it's Hans Zimmer or Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn. It's A People's History of the United States. And it's an issue we were talking about earlier, where you said, hey, are the old guys not getting it? Do they just need to go before we can start making changes? Not necessarily, but what we can do is, the interesting thing about the book is it tells the history of the United States from the perspective of the people that went through some of the most hard-pressed times of history that we know about, things that we weren't always taught in school. You know, how great Christopher Columbus was, the discovery of America. But this book says, hey, let me turn it on the perspective of the natives and what they saw and how they were treated. And it goes through history. It goes from the Columbus coming all the way up to the Clinton administration. And it gives you the perspective that we often were not taught in school.
Well, perception is taught. Marketing is taught, right? We're led to believe that everything that we hear from the trusted source is a very safe and sound thing. Something as simple as the food pyramid, right? And so you realize that something as bad as cereal, that, you know, and cereal in many cases is, and I love cereal. I love me some cereal, right? Who doesn't? But, you know, there are certain things that, like, oh, this trusted source said this thing, so therefore I can trust it. When you realize, that's a good piece of propaganda there. So, I mean, I think perception in this case is marketing. Marketing is taught. It's propaganda. Like, it's pushed. And so it's hard. And I think a lot of people are starting to push back more than ever before, because I think people have access not just through 4 channels. NBC, ABC, Fox, CBS is where they got their kind of media before. And now everyone has their own media channel.
Yeah, no, it's for me, it's more so, people, for so long, people have complained about, hey, I need some help. Hey, things just are, for me, my perception is things are just not equal. There's no equity here. And the numbers, unfortunately, will tell us that a lot of those underserved communities are right. Things aren't equitable, and it's things we have to address. We have to address our own perception. I would say the first step, we were talking about scales earlier, before we're not at 1, but 0.5, whatever you want to put the number at, is addressing inclusion for ourselves. How do we fix our own perceptions? How do we get our brains off of that track of this is comfortable, this isn't comfortable? I need to make sure that I'm hearing other people. It's listening to ourselves and knowing how we perceive things, and then allowing us a chance to listen to others without going in with negative views of people. And that has to be step 1. And that, we're talking business, that starts with the CEO. The CEO controls what goes on in that organization. So the CEO has to say, hey, I need to know how I perceive things and how I convey that message across my organization with the ways I perceive things. So you have your mission, vision, and values. And I will tell you, at the Chamber, it's a thing that we update annually. We're always looking at how we can do things differently, how we can be more accepting. So phase 1 of addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion is our phase 0.5, before you get to 0.5, whatever you want to say, is looking internally at yourself. Everyone's a leader. Looking at yourself and see how you perceive things and how your brain takes it, analyzes it, and take it out of those compartments and start to look at things with a different view.
You may know him as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I know him as just a man who has done incredible things for the last few decades. But how can you use his techniques in your business? I'll show you exactly how. Head on over to ZackMillerSays.com/The Rock, and you can smell what he's cooking.
So let's take that one step further. You do that self-evaluation and you realize, man, I'm not nearly as diverse as I thought that I was. Then what's the next step?
The next step is, we can talk about, there's 2 routes there. Are you the person, or the CEO, or whomever? Are you a person that has the resources to go out and spend all this money educating yourself? I think we've all mentioned something we've read or looked at recently. You've got to educate yourself. And a lot of times it doesn't cost anything to educate yourself. The only thing it costs you, not anything, it costs you time. Take the time to go and talk with someone that you would not normally communicate. The people outside of our bubble. We were talking off camera about how when we want to bring someone up or something, or we know of a job that they might fit, we go to our friends. We go to people that think like us, often look like us, dress like us. They do things like us, but it doesn't help with the inclusion issue. We want to sometimes bring those people in to say, hey, Ronnie Parker, I hear you're having issues with understanding how you view inclusion and diversity. Let me help you by sharing some of my story, sharing some of the ways I perceive things. Interesting enough, the chair of our diversity for the chamber, the last chair, we have a new chair now, but he shared a story where he's an African American male. He's a leader in society. And he said that when he drives his car, he puts his wallet on the dash and drives with it on the dash because he doesn't want to bring any unwanted or unjust attention or make any sudden movements when he has an interaction with a police officer. And immediately somebody would say, wait a second, that's a false perception. Everything's great. Nothing. You just obey things. But how do we fix that internal perception? Because Jim Bibbs was our last chair. Jim Bibbs' perception was that he's uncomfortable. That's an issue that he's dealing with personally. And how do you have those conversations? He took it upon himself to go out and meet with these people, go out people that maybe they're in law enforcement, and have those conversations and get comfortable so they can get to know each other. And then it makes things a lot easier, and it addresses that discomfort you have. And there's tips there that helps him out drastically and so much. And I've done the same thing in my life. I've had to deal with those issues with inclusion where maybe I'll go in the store and I can't find what I want to buy. And what I won't do is I won't leave that store without buying something, because internally, I don't want people to perceive me as someone that might take something, someone might steal something. And people outside can say, hey, that's not the case. You can't think that way. But it's in something internally that I'm dealing with. So what I do is I make those interactions, I connect with people so that I can see their point of view. And maybe it's me that needs to work on it. Or maybe it's somebody that says, I understand how you feel. Let me help you not feel that way. Let me show you some things you can do to take that burden off of yourself. So internally, what you do is you communicate, you network, and you reach out to people, and you learn about how they operate and how things are perceived in their mindset, and then incorporate that some into your own mindset, and it'll help you deal with those issues of inclusion internally.
There's a ton of organizations that seem to silo themselves. So specific example would be like diverse group of whatever. And it's focused on including all of those people in that specific realm, if you will. How can an organization not silo themselves while building that thing, which obviously I think is good for them to do, but not silo themselves so that they don't actually then fix the thing that they're trying to do, which I think is to get that inclusion out of it. So how do you not have a silo that doesn't actually help the inclusion or the including of the overall being of the thing that they're trying to fix?
Yeah, so let me see if I can address it properly, if I'm answering the question correctly. So we tend to think, or we've heard, we're America, the melting pot. We've got everybody, we're all mixed up, we're all together. It's a great thing. I would encourage us to think a little bit differently, and I've used it before. It's more of a bento box. It's a diversity, equity, inclusion. When you're addressing it, there's not, what I'm going to get across is there's not a guidebook out there that'll give you every exact road to being diverse and inclusive, because it's a la carte. It's different for everyone. It's different for every business. Everyone's not the big Fortune 500 organization that can go spend so much money and do all these great things. And when we want to silo ourselves and say that also can be used as an excuse, right? People want to do the right thing, so they say, hey, we see everybody the same. We don't see any color. We want to hire the best person. We want to get the job done. So we want to address it this way. And you end up siloing yourself because there's different people in your organization. Everybody in your organization doesn't think alike. So what you do is, instead of saying we're a melting pot, we're going to take everything and put it together. It's okay to understand that you're all together. You're all under the same umbrella. Just like you have different departments in your organization for a lot of the businesses, you pull expertise from each one of those departments differently, and you get everybody to the table and you say, hey, how can we not silo ourselves? Hey, how can we address inclusion from a race perspective, from a gender perspective, from a disability perspective, from a childcare perspective? There's so many different levels that you can address, and that you can still be inclusive in your organization while also being separate entities or compartments in your organization, so that you're still one company. You still have the same mission, vision, values, but it's okay to have those different different separate silos that you pull from for information. It's okay to have that subject matter expert. And you don't need to have a group that says, hey, the black people go here, the white people go here, the Latinx community go here. But it's okay to say, hey, we have subject matter experts in all these areas that we pull from. So you don't want to be a silo, but you don't want to organize yourself as a melting pot, because what that does, it erases the acceptance of those cultures that are in your organization. It tries to meld them into one culture when it's okay to have different cultures all operating for the same end goal.
Is there a company out there that has risen to be the gold standard that is doing this better than anyone else? Or is there so much work that needs to be done that nobody has yet?
No, I mean it's an ever growing process, but there's people that are doing it well. ADP does a good job. Deanne Green was here. She was a local leader here, and then she went on to be the organization wide diversity, equity, and inclusion person. Cox is doing a really good job. There's a lot of organizations that are doing well, and it's not always just large businesses. Who is it? It was an organization now. Howard Hogue with the Mariners Museum doing a great job. Because
what's something? Great job. I get it. What's something specific that they're doing that is making them have your perception of them doing a great job? Like what? Because I think people hear, oh, ADP is doing great. Well, the perception that someone else might be hearing is that there's something else. So what? Give me an example of one of those three companies from a specific standpoint that they're doing that is making them above and beyond the others.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the Mariners Museum, Howard always will share that he's a really big servant leader. So what he did was he understood that there were stories for the Mariners Museum that they weren't being shared. There were people, there were minorities that had done so much for the museum, had basically built the museum from the foundation up, that weren't being shared. And what he did was he had a meeting with the staff and said, look, we have to share these stories. We have to show that our demographics, the people in our community, are people that build this museum, and a lot of their stories aren't being shared. We saw it with Katherine Johnson and NASA. But what Howard did was, how can we make sure that we are inclusive, not only with our staffing, but with our community? So what he did was he looked around his community and said, hey, we don't have the people coming in that we'd like to see. So he took that approach and said, we're going to change what the charge is to come into the museum. He asked people, he went out and had those conversations, and he said, what would it take to get you guys in here to see this great museum? Look at the changes we're making. Look at the different leaders, the untold stories that we're now telling in this museum. And he went from, I think it was a $15 charge to a $1 charge to go in the museum, because people were saying, hey, we're out here, and some of us, we can't afford that $15. It's just not feasible. And to some people, $15 seems meager, but you talk to somebody that's losing their business in COVID and they can't pay their person $15 to stay on their staff. So he went and said, we're going to change the way we operate. We're going to do it by changing the cover charge to come into the museum. And he's bringing in more revenue and seeing more people, not so much with COVID, but he said that revenue and the foot traffic in the museum is going up, even though he took the pricing down, and he changed those stories of people that did so much and built so much. So what he did was Howard internally expanded that culture story that's been told in the Mariners Museum to attract different audiences, and the community loves him for it, and they're continuing to grow now.
So you mentioned something about, you mentioned the word scared or afraid or one of those things. Cancel culture is just so big right now. How do business leaders deal with that in the fear of being the next target of cancel culture when they're trying to address or fix something within their organization?
It's tough, right? I mean, we've seen it. I absolutely won't name any organizations, but people are trying to do the right thing. People saw the George Floyd incident, and they said, hey, let's make a difference. And there's an organization that tried to make a big difference. I said, hey, let's let all of the group of people that look like this have a day off. Let's let them have a day off. And in retrospect, probably should have let the entire organization off for that day. But what they did was they tried to make a difference. And as you mentioned, cancel culture jumped on it immediately. You can't do that. That's not right. That's incorrect. Don't do it. You're not doing things properly. So the thing is, we have to make it a mindset where we have to understand that people are trying. And in business, you're going to get the good and the bad no matter what you do. If you're in business, we all know that there's not any good without having a little bit of bad. Someone's not going to like your product or your service, and that's okay. The thing is to make sure that we have people out there that are trying to make a difference. So you're going to make mistakes. Everybody hired a diversity officer at the same time. Mm-hmm. You look at February, March timeframe, and you go, if there was I don't know if there's a number there, but there's got to be a site that shows how many of these diversity officers have all of a sudden been hired because people are trying to make a quick correction. Is quick correction the right way to go all the time? Absolutely not. But it shows that you understand there's an issue. At some point, you're listening to someone and you're doing what you believe to be best to make a difference. And I think the end game of that will be someone from that community that you're trying to help will speak up and say, look, we understand it didn't come out the right way, but they're trying to do what's right. And what happens is you get those groups of people that might not know what they're doing is correct, but they're trying to make a difference together. And then we see the collaboration, and you start to form these groups and to put out an agenda to say, hey, we know this is wrong. We're going to address it. And you become a lot more powerful of an entity. And then you kind of start to drown out some of those people from the cancel culture that say, hey, this is wrong.
Right.
Well, I mean, not to.
And if you had a workforce plan to have a diverse workforce, then maybe you wouldn't even be in that position to begin with, because you would have some diversity to say, hey, this might not be a good idea. And so challenge one that I have for today is go out and embrace the uncomfort and the discomfort of being more inclusive and experiencing diversity. And the other is to the business leaders out there is to go out and hire for your weaknesses, offset those weaknesses, stop hiring people just like you. We joke around with my team that sometimes my teammates, they get on my last nerves, but the thing about it is it works because we think differently. So if I'm going out there trying to be going as fast as I can, I have my business partner that's telling me, yo, Tim, pump the brakes, man. We got to slow this thing down. So hire to offset those weaknesses, and maybe you can avoid an uncomfortable or embarrassing situation.
Can I add to the story? And I know the company that you're talking about, but I think my dog is getting yelled at in the background. He's a puppy. So the narrative also changes in that, and it's also being pushed out by other people, by big media, by big tech that pushes stuff like that when it doesn't have the context. And that's what I love that word context, because I feel like context is missed. Someone was trying to, in that specific case, it sounds like, to do something good, right? To not do something bad. And yet we as a society allow this distraction of the whole story not being pushed out, that we get pushed out by a headline like, oh, so-and-so organization is bad, when actually the story should be, hey, so-and-so organization is doing something for the first time ever because they see a problem. And so we're so quick to tell a very negative story instead of actually even looking at it and being like, well, whoa. This is like a monumental milestone positive thing here. Yeah, they might have screwed it up a little bit, but let's stop like looking at it in such a negative thing. I mean, even like I saw this story recently where apparently a couple thousand people got the COVID vaccine overseas, and they're having some side effects to it. And the story is side effects happening to people who have gotten the vaccine. Yep. But then and that's the headline basically, right? So then you see that and you're like, oh, the vaccine's a bad thing. Right? Then the actual story in there is that the two people who had the side effects always have side effects no matter what they take. So to me, that's not a story. That's not negative. Yet that's what we are pushing out and accepting as a society, the clicks. But again, that's what we allow to infect us. And then we push that out. So, oh my God, this is such a bad thing. And it doesn't have to be something about a bank on June 10th or something like that. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be about a vaccine. It could be something as stupid as Ryan Lochte at the Olympics and the media not actually fact checking before something. And so, I think oftentimes we allow these organizations to dictate our thoughts before us even putting in some sort of context of our own behind it. And I think that's wrong. And I think if I was going to add something in there to your list, Tim, it would be, hey, just because you read something, maybe you should do a little bit of your own due diligence and understand what the real story is.
Yeah, no, and that's what we talked about earlier, guys, where that's where as business owners, we have our champions come in, right? Because we're not going to control the free press, right? They say what they want to say, and that to some point you can say, hey, we're going to sue you. You can't do things like that. But for the most part, you get on Facebook and somebody tells a story and it gets picked up millions of times, and that's the headline without having any context. But what you do is that's where the inclusive piece comes in. I said it earlier. Your biggest champions are the people that are working for you. If you create an environment that they feel like they're a part of that culture, they see something in themselves in that organization, because they're the ones that are dealing with the people that are now outside of your organization holding up signs up and down or protesting in front of your business. Those people can say, wait a second, guys, I work with you every day. You come here every day. I'm going to tell you that that's not the case. And then you have a chance, you have more people on your side, as I mentioned earlier. There's a chance to say, here's a story that we're telling internally that's now spreading to the consumer.
And they'll push back against the negative side of that too. Exactly. Right. And so that could be the internal people, that could be champion customers. It's like, hey, if someone leaves this negative review or saying something negative, you're going to have that champion come in there and swoop in and say, fake news. Like, this is not the story. Like it's. So, Ronnie, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
No, gentlemen, I applaud you so much for being willing to take on this conversation. As we mentioned earlier, it's not, and we didn't discuss a lot of the really, really tough topics, which because of time, but people are, I think, hopefully what we've done is we've left people with a way to look at diversity and inclusion differently. It's not a black and white story. We're a world that lives in color, and it's so much more broad than just thinking black and white. So if anything today, I think we mentioned it some earlier, I'd ask business owners, or the community to first look and understand it, how you understand and perceive diverse and inclusive issues. How do you digest that internally? And then how do you portray that amongst your business? At the first step, once you begin to understand that you don't have all the answers, there's a better way to do business. Even if you're excelling, there's a better way that you can prepare yourselves for the unlikely outcome that COVID-19 pops up, so that you can adjust and make a difference and help yourself and help the organization or the community that you serve. And number two is, once you understand how you operate and that there's a need for change, I would get your team involved, and don't let that team just be your leadership team, your VPs, your senior VPs, your executives. Make sure that you've got your frontline employees there, because those are the guys that can tell you, hey, I'm hearing from the consumer that this isn't working. You don't have this product that this person so much needs, and your community outside happens to be a lot of the people that you're not serving because you're not communicating with them. So get your frontline staff involved in your decision making. And then step three, once you get your frontline staff in, create a plan for your organization to be inclusive. It's not a Colonel Sanders secret sauce or recipe, right? Share that with the community, because it's going to take
flavors in there, isn't there? So I mean, that's diversity in itself.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't go to McDonald's and get a burger every day and you eat it, and I promise you get that same burger, you're eventually going to get tired of it. So you want diversity in your food. You got to have diversity in your life. It's got to be in your organization. It'll make it a lot better. And once you get those secrets, share them with other people so that they can help their organization. And remember, it's a la carte. It's not one secret sauce to addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a way that works for your organization that helps other people get involved. There's no secret book out there. If that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for the quick, easy fix, you're not going to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're going to address the comfort of yourself thinking you've done the right thing when you've actually probably set yourself back.
The Fervent 4 is powered by the Small Business Development Center, which helps local small businesses grow through counseling. If you're interested in learning more on how the SBDC can help your business, head to startwheel.org/weekly.
Ronnie, this has been absolutely mesmerizing. I'm trying to be like my WWE announcer in there. If you smell. Done. I'm done with the Rock impersonations in 2020. In 2021, I'm going to try and be the Macho Man.
There you go.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good other.
There you go. I appreciate it. People are interested in learning more about you. Head to the Chamber website. Is that where you want to?
HamptonRoadsChamber.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Ronnie Park. If you're looking to address diversity and inclusion in your organization, please reach out to us at the Chamber, and we're more than happy to help.
Yeah, Ronnie, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate this. I could have talked about this for a couple more hours, but it's been a lot of fun, so I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
Maybe we'll have to do around 2.5 or 1.5,
There you go.
Or maybe this was 0.5 and we'll get to 1 on your Cartesiv scale and all that craziness. So
let's talk about it. I'm here for you, gentlemen.
We'll keep it going. Appreciate you. See you soon.
Take care.
And pancake.